Okay, welcome everyone. This is the Geospatial Online Transportation User Group webinar. Today we'll be talking about data governance. My name is Mark Sarmiento. I'm from the Federal Highway Administration. We've got two really good presentations today, one from Ohio on data governance, or one from Ohio and the other one from Connecticut DOT. I'll be starting things off with a short little presentation on some resources that we have on data governance from TRB and Federal Highway. After the presentations, we'll have some time for questions and answers. And certainly if you've got questions during each of our presentations, you can also enter them into the chat pod, which you should see on your screen somewhere. I guess I should also, if you note the last button, AASHTO, in case there's some product that you hear, just because we talk about it doesn't mean we're endorsing or promoting it, basically. And if you got any ideas or interest in presenting, you can contact Penelope Weinberger or Jeremy Aycock. Their email addresses are on the screen. So let's see. So GOTUG, a little background if you're not familiar with what we're doing. These are some key people. We have co-chairs. Jeremy Aycock is from North Carolina DOT. He's actually the chair right now. We had Caitlin Marousis, but she's moved on to another position. AASHTO liaison is Penelope Weinberger, and I'm actually the Federal Highway liaison. So what is GOTUG? GOTUG stands for Geospatial Online Transportation Users Group. We began as a AASHTO innovation initiative that was started by Utah DOT for their U-Plan project. This project was a working group under the Standing Committee on Planning, Subcommittee on Data, but now GOTUG is part of the Committee on Data Management and Analytics. As a work group, we'll provide ongoing support and development of transportation agency capabilities regarding comprehensive GIS-based online collaboration platforms. So we have our steering committee, the chairs we mentioned earlier. We also have Eric Abrams from Iowa DOT, Andrew Wimsatt from Texas Transportation Institute, Nicole Hansen from the Idaho Transportation Department, myself from Federal Highway, and Penelope Weinberger from AASHTO. So why GOTUG? Why do we create GOTUG specifically? So once the U-Plan AASHTO Innovation Initiative sort of finished up, we wanted to keep going. Wanted to continue the momentum in reaching out to all of the state DOTs and trying to promote the use of web-based geospatial online tools. And we also feel that we wanted to marry business needs with innovative web-based geospatial solutions. So here's some resources. We have a GOTUG website at gotug.transportation.org. We also have a new distribution list, and that's where you can get information on upcoming webinars, bulletins. You can sign yourself up if you, I guess, on that webpage. You can send an email to gotug@transportation.org if you want to suggest webinar topics or provide feedback to us. Primarily, we've been doing quarterly webinars to highlight different examples of geospatial online tools or activities that affect these types of tools. We've also in the past participated at the AASHTO GIST Symposium, where we've met together as a group or did some presentations on the work that we've been doing. Some AASHTO Data Committee resources include increasing the visibility of GIS and geospatial data issues, and we serve as a technical resource. The committee serves as a technical resource group for all AASHTO members. So make sure you put this on your calendar. We have a couple of upcoming webinars. Like I said, we do them quarterly. The next one after today's is December 4th, 2019. This will be GIS in Design. The next one after that on March 4th We're still determining that. If you've got an idea, please let us know. So I'll start things off with talking about some data governance resources that are out there, and what's the perspective from Federal Highway. So why data governance? I just thought this image was interesting because there's an actual town called Y in Arizona. But at the last GIST symposium, two of the questions that we do in the survey highlight projects and applications that state DOTs are involved with, and you'll see that there's a lot of activity in roads and highways. Obviously data governance, ArcGIS Online, Meyer, it's safety data, HPMS, and so since there's a lot of activity in those areas, there's a lot of interest in data governance itself in all of these other areas. And so data plays obviously an important role in a lot of the work and all of the work that we do in transportation agencies. And so there's several resources out there that are helping transportation agencies kind of figure out what data governance is and help them assess themselves. These three here are from NCHRP and TRB. These are reports and projects that have been done over the last 4 or 5 years or so. The first one is the NCHRP Synthesis 508 report, which is on data management and governance practices. And that's a link if you want to get more information on that one. The other report is a eCircular, TRB eCircular 196, Improving Safety Data Programs through Data Governance and Data Business Planning. And then the third report that's listed on here is NCHRP Report 814, Data to Support Transportation Agency Business Needs, a Self-Assessment Guide. These are all really good tools, especially 814 has an actual, I believe there's some actual spreadsheet tools that can really help you assess your agency with respect to data governance. From Federal Highway, we have a Roadway Data Improvement Program. We offer technical assistance in this area. Bob Pollock in the Federal Highway Office of Safety is the main contact. And I've listed the email address, the web address for their homepage for more information on that. But they look at specific technical assistance areas. They look at roadway data collection and technical standards, data analysis tools and uses, data management and governance. The contact specifically for data management and governance is Stuart Thompson. And there's also, they provide examples of data governance efforts, especially from the safety perspective, amongst all the state DOTs in the country. There's also, you may be familiar with transportation performance management. That's been a pretty hot topic over the last three or 4 years or so. And there's a toolbox that's available for transportation agencies. And within that toolbox, there's a guidebook and assessment tool, which specifically is Component C is data management assessment, and Component D is data usability and analysis assessment. So there's some tools from the TPM perspective to help you assess your agency with respect to data governance. For more information, you can go contact Susan Hughes Rex and that's her email address on the screen. And also there's a website that you can go to, www.tpmtools.org. And so that's another resource that's available. Something specific to highway payments, there's a state data quality management program, which defines acceptable levels of data quality, describes how the data collection process will ensure the level of quality of that data, and then it addresses critical areas where errors can occur. So all of this is all required as part of TPM PM2 system performance, but this is specifically on the data aspect with respect to pavements. So this again is another resource that Federal Highway provides. Of course, probably many of you are familiar with HPMS. All states are required to provide HPMS data to our Office of Policy. And part of that is part of that work that Federal Highway or a resource that Federal Highway offers is we do our division offices are involved in a program review with the DOT, and so that's another way to kind of assess how you're collecting data, managing, and distributing that data. So we have all these resources. Why do we care? Because we do. Part of our strategic plan at Federal Highway specifically calls out data-driven, the importance of data. So our first objective, strategic objective 1, we're focused on safety, and so we're really emphasizing the use of data-driven systemic safety management systems. Our second strategic objective involves improving program and project decision making by making a data-driven approach for asset management and performance-based programs. So those first two objectives, we really call out the importance of data, but really all of the objectives, highlight the importance and the role that data plays. So part of what Federal Highway does is provide information to the Congress, especially through our condition and performance report that we provide every other year. And so we have several databases that support that report that goes to Congress, and those would be HPMS, NBI, the National Bridge Inventory, and NTD, which is the National Transit Database. So all of those three databases, those rely on data that we get from the states, from transit agencies, from other people basically that we rely on to provide this data. So we take state DOT data and we put into a report, and we provide that to Congress, help them make decisions ideally. So we rely on states to provide us with data. We want to make sure that we're getting good data. And of course, the question you have to ask yourself is then, well, how are states? What are they doing with data governance? How are they trying to do a better job with collecting, managing, maintaining the data that they have? And that what we get to is today on today's webinar on data governance. So, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to start with Connecticut. Mario Damiata is the RDIP project coordinator, UConn at the University of Connecticut Transportation Safety Research Center. He's going to start things off. Then after him, we'll have Ohio DOT Ian Kidner. And then after that, we'll have some time for questions and answers. So at this point, as you're listening to the presentations, I wanted to kind of list some things to make sure you guys listen out for. Why did the specific agency get into data governance? What are the benefits that they found? What were some challenges in implementing data governance? What are some lessons learned, tips, strategies for effective data governance? And then for the audience, what are some key takeaways? So keep those in mind. When we have the Q&A, hopefully some of these will be addressed already, but if there's questions, these are the things that at least I'll be looking for. And then if things get a little dry on the question side, I might ask audience if there's some key takeaways that they got out of today's webinar. So, okay, at this point, we'll turn things over to Mario Damiata. Okay, Mario.
So, let me see, show my screen. And I'm going to go right to my PowerPoint. Mark, do you think I should just go to slideshow just in case something goes wrong, or what do you think? Go to slideshow. Can you guys see my screen? No, I'm not. Hello?
Yes, you're presenting your slides.
Yes.
You're not on mute. We can hear you and we can see you.
Thank you. Thanks, Penelope. I appreciate that. All right, so my name is Mario Damiata, and I initially came to the DOT after a 40-year career with NHTSA. Yeah, I know. helped to improve the crash data program between 2012 and 2016, came back to facilitate road data improvement program, and hung on to become a champion here for enterprise data management, and that's currently my role. With me today are some members of our TED team. Greg Ciparelli, whose name is familiar to a lot of you, is one of our Meyer specialist and one of our key roadway people. Bill Pratt is from our capital projects program, and I have Don Griswold and Shalini Babuji, who are business analysts in our IT section. So we're still very much a work in progress with regard to data governance, and we don't have any formal structures inside the department that actually are tasked with managing information. And this project got started essentially at the grassroots level in the department and still retains its identity as essentially a grassroots initiative. So what's driving our need for data governance essentially is something we're calling the Transportation Enterprise Data Warehouse. We'll go into that in a little bit, but we're taking a slightly different approach than I think most DOTs would. What I'm going to try to cover today is just some basic points about what is TED and why is it important to us. Briefly describe some early efforts and drivers that gave birth to our efforts to manage data here systemically in the department. How we went about creating a data governance council with the help of Federal Highway and some of its guidance, and what we're doing now, short of a formal data governance structure, to make data governance achievable, and how we're focusing on changing the data culture as a parallel effort to implementing data governance. And finally, some lessons learned, even at this early stage, about do's and don'ts for data governance. So what's next? Yeah, okay, so that's just, again, just a brief description of our data warehouse. So what is the Transportation Enterprise Data Program? We like to describe it as a single transportation database fed and maintained by authoritative data sources that support the analysis of agency-wide transportation data using multiple tools and methods. You can see various components of the program. Field data collection is key. Managing data to prepare it for migration to an enterprise platform is important. Having a robust system architecture that works to manage this data. Having a geospatial management capability. Certainly having a set of data governance rules in place. And ultimately, to support not only safety analysis, but asset management, capital project management across the board. That's our vision. It's ambitious because it involves virtually every bureau and program in the department. So why is it important here? Well, the first reason why TED is important is because it represents a change in mindset in how we manage data as a shared and integrated asset. There's a lot of folks here who manage data and manage it well, but they consider it primarily their own data for their own purposes and have been for quite a while. Now, I would describe these, everyone's sort of on a spectrum of maturity with regard to sharing enterprise data, but I think we've made tremendous inroads since 2016 when the TED group got started, and everyone is aware right now of enterprise needs for their data, and within the confines of their primary responsibilities as data stewards, are really doing their best to achieve a level of cooperation and collaboration with us. TED offers, hopefully, one-stop shopping for all the data that we need. It's going to reduce data collection and management costs and create opportunities to link and integrate different business data sets. We hope it's going to minimize duplication of effort across the department, collect once and use many times. And we also hope to, improve business, to establish business intelligence and analytics. Right now, we have it for our crash data. It's actually residing at our Yukon website. I'm not sure anywhere else in the department we're really using Power BI for business analytics. not really yet. We're getting there. But most importantly for us, TED is a vehicle. It's an effort. It's a vision for helping us to create a new data culture of what we call collaboration, cooperation, and communication. Bill reminds me often that in the many years that he's been here in the department, that this is the highest level of collaboration and trust he has seen. So I briefly want to describe early efforts to bring order to the data management process. The first was a perceived need here between our roadway folks and our capital projects folks that they needed to work together to create some geospatial capability to track and locate projects. A proof of concept was developed, and a data platform known as TED was created as a prototype. Down the road, there were other drivers that were forcing us to look at data as a systemic resource in the department. One was the asset management plan, and then we turned to Federal Highway and invited them to come in here in late 2016 to do an RDIP assessment, and we took advantage of workshops after that. What I would like to do, Bill is in the room here, and he was actually, I consider him a founding father of TED, and he's the one that started the initial conversations in the cafeteria with the roadway folks about the need to work together to create a geospatial LRS and the capital projects tracking and location system. I want to give him a minute or two to basically inform us of how that got started.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So what Mario is talking about is, you know, and it's funny how when you're without something, you make do and you end up creating something that you didn't have before. And this was kind of an odd story, but I'll tell it anyways. Our Esri solutions were of limited resource. I'll put it that way, that we didn't have a lot of resources who were supporting that system. So at the time, it really wasn't an option for us. So we started looking at putting together some authoritative data sets, primarily from a new road network system that we had. And I was helping our planning office implement that new road network system, just with my vision on the capital project side of how we may be able to use this data later. And that's what happened. And they did a tremendous job on our road network, our LRS, which has both state and local roads. And again, I saw these opportunities as a place where we can start tracking our capital project activity. And not only that, but other additional things like major assets, bridges, and traffic signals and things like that to start integrating asset management along with capital project work activities against those assets. So I'll probably stop right around there. We kind of hit a little bit of a, you know, like any production and development, we had some long downhill runs. We had a lot of speed, and then we would slow down and, you know, kind of take a breath and look at what we've done and try to come back and continue that effort. And that's where we are today. We're actually in a transition to Esri. Now we kind of got the Esri stuff back on board, but we've already kind of carved out what we see and need as governance and with our data. What we're showing here right now are 26 geospatial layers that we consider authoritative here at the DOT. And from the top down, you're seeing road network information that was vital into, you know, developing any enterprise data here. As a matter of fact, this whole thing started with a request by our engineering administrator to start tracking projects on a map. And to do that, we needed a base map, and at that time, which was about 5 or 6 years ago, we did not have our state routes geospatially located. So now we do, and we also obviously on top of that have road classifications, we have road characteristics, and as you can see, assets, and then we get down into capital projects and other things. We see this as kind of the building blocks of geospatial data across the enterprise, and it was a good start, and now we're kind of looking at this and rebuilding and redoing our goals, redoing our roles and responsibilities to expand to be able to do this with the current resources we have. So it was a good exercise for us.
So these were other drivers that were helping us with TED. I mentioned the RDIP assessment that we took advantage of in 2016. In the meantime, our asset management plan was focusing on developing goals for pavement condition and markings, bridges, signals, signs, and sign supports. It was very ambitious. So, we thought the RDIP assessment was really successful. We brought a team of 3 experts in here from various states, Illinois, South Carolina, and remember the 3rd state. But and they came up with some recommendations about what they had. They took a look at what you just saw from Bill here, the prototype version of TED, came back and made these major recommendations to us to continue our efforts to create an enterprise data management system, create some capabilities to do mapping and establish procedures to integrate mapping and reporting. And you can see that second bullet there, establish formal data governance structure that views departmental needs across organizational lines and create a clear vision statement that represents the collective views of the department. So we took these recommendations to heart and very quickly decided to reach out to Federal Highway to have them host in April of 2017 a data integration workshop. And as a result of that, we learned everything that we needed to know about how to integrate data. And we had already done a lot, and Bill in his efforts had done a lot to integrate systems on the engineering side. But we came up with this statement of what our vision was for the system. And I don't really need to read it, but our goal here was basically to make data accessible in a form that anyone internal to the department and external to the department could use, and to make as much data available as possible for their own, both for viewing needs, analytical needs, research needs, and planning needs. And eventually our hope here is to expand this system to locals as well. So we took to heart, I know this is a bit of a busy slide, but we took the safety planning model that was presented to us in the data integration workshop and literally created work groups around our TED group. And the work groups followed as best we could the safety planning model, starting with the Meyer effort and development of the field data collection tool within our roadway group. We already had assets contained within an XOR application, and that group was to work on preparing and making those assets ready for migration to an enterprise platform. We had a group which included IT, primarily led by IT, that worked on the system architecture, the workflow, and the ETL processes. And then we had what we called an Atlas group, which is over here. And that essentially is Bill's group, which was essentially an application designed to update project information literally, I guess, on a nightly basis based on the status of that project, and to feed as much as possible asset data into that application so that engineers and designers could have that.
Yeah, let me just add to that. Sure, Mario. So Atlas along with, it kind of ran alongside TED, was initially a viewer, a WebGIS viewer, that we had some developers develop some project location management tools, and those tools would extract the underlying road network, underlying assets, bridges and signals, underlying road characteristics, ADT, COG information, all kinds of really good stuff that normally our engineers had to go and gather all this at a number of different sites with a number of different authoritative systems, where we were able to pull it all from that LRS, and understanding that they're managing that data was really a quick shortcut for us to identify a whole bunch of information about a location of a project. And then there became these other hidden gems that we weren't even trying to reach, and we were able to get some more added functionality for other work type tools like investigations and other things that we're able to do. So, yeah, good stuff.
All right. I want to move a little bit farther along here. So, we did take a run at creating a data governance console, and as a result of a second workshop that we had in July of 2017 on data governance, also sponsored by Federal Highway, and in that workshop they helped us to distinguish the difference between data management, data governance, and data stewardship, and basically tried to educate our mid and senior level management about the importance of data governance. And we did come up with a mission statement for a high-level executive committee that was going to oversee data governance, going to be made up of exclusively of senior managers, and they were going to provide guidance and help secure resources to support our enterprise planning activities. And we're going to regularly brief them. In addition, we created a data governance console that had these major functions. I just want to highlight that it was primarily designed to prioritize safety and asset data governance solutions, and to try to inventory where we were in the department in terms of what's being collected and maintained, what standards existed, what existed in terms of user manuals and data dictionaries, and basically trying to take a snapshot of that. We never quite got that off the ground. We did meet early and often. And there was, as a result of the meetings, we didn't really, I think part of it was just the lack of resources and lack of time and a dedicated staff to kind of oversee this. That said, we did take a stab at our first data governance rules. And they essentially focused on defining data as an asset in the department for the first time to be managed like any other asset, and to make sure that every data asset in the department had a requisite asset data owner and steward. We then also developed a memorandum that said that defined the roles and responsibilities of the owners and stewards relative to collection, storage, maintenance for their own purposes, but also for the management of data for enterprise purposes. We then established metadata requirements and also asset data requirements for migrating your data to the data warehouse. Needless to say, so we never really issued them. And there were many reasons. The climate at the time really wasn't ready for one bureau, essentially the Planning Bureau, which was the champion of this effort, to impose these rules on other bureaus in the department. Just was not the right time to do this. We still had a lot of homework to do with regard to executive buy-in and support from each bureau. Our IT office, while extremely helpful and valuable to this effort, wasn't necessarily supportive of imposing these rules at this time either. And it also involved that we were going to impose these rules. We were imposing extra work on folks, and we didn't have the resources at that point in time to help implement that. And we took a step back and realized that our data culture was not ready to fully adopt a data governance regime. At the same time, as Bill mentioned, we had developed essentially a prototype TED platform, and there were a number of challenges that were beginning to emerge with that platform. One of them was the ETL process, which started to break down fairly frequently and shut down the system. And data quality checks, we had what we called an ETL process, but it really was just an extract and load process. We really didn't have transformation of data for data quality purposes. It was also a fairly complicated data flow framework connecting various source files. So while it was really a great proof of concept, we really needed to take a step back and figure out what we wanted to do. And we did take that step back by, I believe the recommendation came out of the data governance workshop about the need for developing a business analyst function inside the department. And again, we took that to heart, and we went out and openly recruited through our IT office a senior business analyst from the private sector, Don Griswold, who's sitting across the table from me now, and who began to introduce us to the world of business requirements, which is well known in the private sector and perhaps in certain parts of the public sector, but was certainly not well known here in the state of Connecticut, let alone the DOT. So Don, one of the first things he helped us to think about were the high-level functional requirements for what the new TED would look like, and this was an initial take and look at that. And he also authored, in concert with IT staff, an architecture review project that developed some recommendations for what the new TED platform would look like. And Don, if you have a minute, do you want to just go through those recommendations briefly, just to let people know why you selected those and why they're so important?
Well, I think we definitely needed to focus as a agency on the quality of the data and where we were storing the data. Data was in multiple places, in multiple stages of life, needed to get them squared away. We needed the ability to have temporal data in the database. We needed to be able to look back in time and see where we were. Levels of security and data access needed to be brought to the architecture. We wanted to build out the whole business intelligence piece of the architecture for how to best assess the data and manage its creation of answers down the road. We wanted it in a cloud-based environment where we be a little bit more robust than our back office environment, which was kind of, at this point in time, kind of hindering the process that we needed to make. We needed simpler ETL designs, really taking advantage of the transformation capabilities and the combination of data elements to get to the results that we were looking for. Bill's Atlas tool, in conjunction with the TED database, we wanted to make sure that had operating rules from the aspects of how it behaved, along with the operational data, the actual operational database that Atlas is versus the data warehouse, which TED is. Built out, or wanted to build out, new metadata solutions. We had a pretty robust solution in place, but with the temporal data, we needed the ability to have metadata actually track the history of data going forward. So those are some of the key things, Mario.
Okay. So while that was going on, and we were taking a step back to evaluate how we were going to implement data governance and this new sensitivity about how to grow the data culture, we had a peer exchange with our colleagues from Ohio and Iowa DOT, and let me just go into the results of that. The conclusions of that peer exchange were several. One was that we had made impressive strides over the past several years in building out our enterprise capabilities, but that we were also at a crossroads with respect to the future development of TED. We needed to step back and examine the business requirements, which we were in the process of doing, set up a robust data quality management process, and basically increase the stability of the TED architecture. And above all, we needed to take into account people, process, and technology elements in coming up with our future solutions. So we also developed some guiding principles that we presented at the peer exchange with Ohio and Iowa. And these are still an educational effort across the department, and we're trying to get everybody on board with adopting these guiding principles. And we try to do that every week at our TED meetings. The first is that we want to implement a collaborative, transparent, consensus-driven approach across the board. We want to reach out and add value to the business processes that we're touching. We want to have a common sense, reasonable set of standards that will guide data stewardship that will be easy to implement. Our data will be managed in a way that meets individual business owner needs as well as the collective needs of the department. And we're going to draw, the TED Enterprise platform is going to draw on consistently changing authoritative data sources to integrate, store, and display data. So, so another thing that we have done to help us with this process is to reach out to our university partner, the University of Connecticut. And we have developed a memorandum of understanding, which has just been signed. And UConn, with some technical vendor support, is going to be helping us to redesign the TED architecture. They're going to work on the Atlas database and help to create a new Atlas website. They're going to document business and technology requirements for 3 targeted assets here, actually ADA, sidewalks, guide rail, and signals, and help us to develop some GIS solutions around those, stand these up on a new TED web portal, and document how we can establish a safety project using some of this new information. In addition, we're going to continue to work on other components inside of TED, which is trying to create a relationship with our maintenance division on all of the assets that they touch on a daily basis. And they currently have a paper-based work order system that needs to be automated and needs to be integrated with authoritative data sources. And we're working on that. In the meantime, we're continuing to develop our Meyer data collection tools, get those pilot tested and off the ground. So, and at the same time, take a look at our Esri licensing structure. One of the things that I want to go back. Can I go back? I can, right? Can I go back? No, I can't go back. I want to go back to some other things that have been going on here to change the data culture. And one is something I'm calling new levels of transparency in asset data development and delivery. We now routinely engage at least a half a dozen data stewards on a weekly basis. We ask them to report on progress they're making in data modeling, in developing collection tools, in improving data quality, whatever's going on in their data world. We either ask them orally to present in front of our TED group or to send us a written report. We've changed our TED meetings to become more work sessions each week now. During the month, we'll focus on a specific asset and discuss its strengths and weaknesses and where we're going with it. At the end of the month, we'll do more of a progress report where all of the TED members come together and we take a systemic look across all of the assets and what's going on with the TED platform and what's going on in other areas that are important to us. One of the other things that we're trying to do is become more service-oriented, for want of a better term. In our roadway, I have to give a lot of credit here to our roadway team, which has really taken the lead with limited resources to support asset data stewards. And Greg is in the room. I just want to give him a couple minutes just to talk a little bit at a very high level. He's actually doing a lot more than those 4 bullets you see on the slide, but I just wanted to give him a chance to give you a sense of how the roadway team is beginning to create connections with asset data stewards that are really going to benefit us in the long run.
just kind of like what Mario said, we're kind of more service-oriented, customer service. We have kind of intricate knowledge of the system itself, our LRS management system. We do have some asset stewards who are managing their data within there, so we're able to kind of appropriately convey any implications that comes with that, both from a snapshotting standpoint or from kind of just a data access standpoint. Also the benefits that come with that, where if you're within our system, we're able to directly link all of your assets to the LRS, whereas outside of it, that becomes a little more problematic. So what we've been trying to do is, where it's appropriate, push some of those asset stewards to managing their data in the LRS management system as an asset, but where it's not, we've been working with those asset stewards to, as the second bullet says, use FME software for bulk loading and data quality checks. We're actually using that as potentially one of the applications for marrying some of those assets to the LRS outside of the system. That we're trying to automate that process. We're going to look at FME server to kind of help us with that. But ultimately, working with the business, with the data stewards to kind of define those business functions and kind of what area would they want to snap it. So we can use kind of billboards as an example. So if we're snapping billboards to our LRS, we're going to end up with billboards does not manage an authoritative LRS ID. So we're really doing it basically geospatially, but maybe that's not the manner in which they would want to do it. Does it matter what road it's closest to, or does it matter the route that the billboard is actually viewable from if you're trying to do an analysis on, say, Interstate 84. So doing some interviews with those data stewards to kind of understand what they want, and then being able to build that logic into the FME workflow is definitely something that we're exploring now and looking to do more of as we continue to kind of offer this service. As far as Power BI, it's just that's more of a selfish need on our part. We did have a lot of reporting capabilities out of our old legacy system, and those unfortunately haven't been kind of replicated yet in our current system. So we're using extracts and snapshots to kind of come up with known data structure, and then being able to kind of hit those with some BI reports that will just kind of replace all the stuff that we're both either mandated to do or different reports that we feel would be really useful to the data stewards.
All right. I just have one more slide, Penelope, and this is it. Takeaways from our data governance experience thus far. What have we learned? Well, I like Bill has also another mantra, and that's every DOT has its own DNA, and one has to read and adjust to it. And this DOT, it's been a work in progress for me to learn its DNA, because sometimes I think its DNA changes a little bit every day. But the first thing I've learned is that we need to respect the priority of the core business functions, no matter how inefficient they may currently be. They have business to do every day. There's a road network out there to be taken care of. It needs to be taken care of. We cannot get in the way. So that's lesson number one for me. We need to grow data governance from the bottom up as well as from the top down. We need to win the trust and confidence of the data stewards. We're doing that, as Greg just mentioned, through developing needed tools, apps, and services. So I think we're going to stick to this approach of data governance coming in both directions to ultimately change the data culture. We have to begin with known best practices of developing an enterprise home for accessing authoritative data. That is why we found a business analyst. We've now expanded the business analyst team to include a second individual. We're speeding up the process of business analysis here to focus not only on the legacy assets you saw in TED, but also the new targeted assets that are going to be working on with UConn. You need to secure and grow staffing expertise to get things done and to sustain successes. We do not have a consolidated GIS capability inside the department. We have created, at this point, a functioning team that is, at this point, just exploring the landscape of what sort of GIS capabilities we already have. Another lesson, make sure IT is totally on board and has the resources to support software purchases. Still working on that one. Make sure everyone is a player, including the field staff who touch assets every day. Our senior data champion here, Robin Cabellis, always asks me to make sure that we have every bureau represented inside that TED group. And we had to struggle to get some of those bureaus on board, but every TED meeting right now represents literally every aspect of the department. And then finally, a couple Final points here: secure a university partner or vendor to do some of the early heavy lifting. We think UConn's going to really speed up this process for us and help us to deliver a workable set of products by the fall of next year. And then, of course, continue to engage senior management with demonstrations of project gains. And when we feel at the appropriate time, when everyone feels reasonably comfortable, reasonably trained, those data governance rules that you saw early on in this presentation will in fact become directives and procedures, uniform standardized procedures that everyone's going to follow here without too much pain in terms of making them work for their assets. So that's essentially our presentation, and that's the team that we currently have, and be happy to entertain any questions after Ian's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mario. Sorry about that. We're going to go ahead and switch over to Ian Kidner from Ohio DOT.
Hello, is my screen coming through there? Yeah, you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Are we seeing the screen?
See a beautiful green front slide there.
Awesome.
Take it away.
Well, thank you. Great. Well, Connecticut, that was some good stuff. I enjoyed the meeting we had a little over a year ago, and I was glad to see the progress that you guys have made. It's good things. So, yeah, my name's Ian. I'm the GIS manager here with ODOT, and I think today I'm just going to share what our journey has been like at this agency in and around data governance. And Mark and Mario both talked a little bit about kind of what data governance is, and I've used this. Where is my thing moving? There we go. I've used this couple of slides to talk about it, because I think data governance is a really challenging concept for some people, and it's challenging for me, just for everybody, because it's not clear what it is. And so I think in lots of cases, people think a lot about the technology aspect of it. And so let's say we have these 3 different systems, A, B, and C, and they're pushing data into some type of warehouse. And then you have these other apps, 1, 2, and 3, that are trying to consume that information. Well, then what happens when, you know, the databases on the left have different ways of storing information? What do you do with that when you shove that into the warehouse? You know, you could transform it, you could do different things, but then there's implications up and downstream of that, and what do you do? And so at a high level, I think that's a really, really simplistic term of what data governance is. And we'll get into some more about what it is and beyond just the technical aspects of it. So when I look at the data governance journey here at ODOT, I guess I start back when I joined the agency back in 2011. I'm not entirely sure what was going on before then, because I wasn't here. But I know we've done some really good things between now, or then and now. One of the first things that happened was we released this application we call TIMS, which was the Transportation Information Management, or mapping system, mapping system. We released it in 2012 with a major upgrade in 2014. And this was just a public-facing portal where we published a bunch of data. And it's user-friendly, people love it. And the great thing about it is that as the different offices or business areas across ODOT saw it, they said, hey, we want to get our information in here because it makes it easier for us to do our jobs, talking to our customers, or even ourselves. And so I said, hey, that's great. We can get your data in here, but you know what? We need to move your data into SQL Server before we can do that. And in doing so, we're going to happen to apply these little standards and different things to try to clean up the data just a little bit and structure stuff a little bit better. And so that's kind of data governance right there. It's not fully data governance, but kind of is. And in doing so, we expose a bunch of problems in the data. We increase that usage and sharing of data, and it just exposed all these different issues. And so I think that just the whole TIMS project, it started that foundation for what could shared enterprise information really do for the agency? How is it valuable? And it started to shift that culture a little bit and that understanding here at ODOT. The next thing that I see as a strong foundational thing for data governance is asset management. DOTs have been doing asset management for a long time, but also in 2012, MAP 21 came out and said, hey, state DOTs, you guys need to have a formal asset management plan. And it's just so that we're making sure that as public agencies, we're utilizing taxpayer funds appropriately and judiciously. And I think it's a good idea. And in ODOT's asset management plan, we have these 5 core principles you see here. And you can see number 4 is we are data driven. We recognize that to make wise decisions, we need to have a lot of information about the stuff we own and manage, and it needs to be good quality information too. And so part of our implementation of our formal asset management plan has been to set up some structure. And so here we see how we have our executive management group, and they work with our deputy directors who oversee divisions within central office as well as our regional districts. And then we have our asset management leadership team composed of any number of people. And then on the side, we have a technology council that helps review technology requests so that we're not expanding our technology footprint beyond what we should. And when the technology council gets requests for anything asset management related, they send it to this group called the Transportation Asset Management Audit Group, who also works in conjunction with our TAM coordinators in the districts to help push things out. And this TAM audit group is when we talk about data governance, they've done an amazing job laying some great foundation for data governance. So the TAM audit group is led by an office called the Asset Inventory and Systems Integration. A gentleman named John Puente does this, and again, fantastic work that this group does. And the TAM audit group is it's a cross-functional team of different people, and as the requests come in for, say, hey, we want to do a sign inventory, or we need to do a BMP inventory, or whatever it is, we have a way of prioritizing that based off of our executive management directives. And then the TAM audit group goes about developing enterprise level requirements. And they've developed a great process. And this is just the workflow for this process. And effectively, it breaks down into 3 or 4 stages. In stage 1, we say, hey, we get this request. Do we have somebody who's going to be a business owner for this asset? You know, we're basically asking, is somebody going to be accountable? Who can we go to? We wanted to get away from a scenario where people like the GIS team who might be pushing out technology became the de facto owners and supporters of everything about a piece of information. That's not an appropriate setup. And so first stage, we say we find an owner, and until we get an owner, we don't really do anything. From there, the TAM audit group develops requirements using that cross-functional team. They bring in subject matter experts from different areas to make sure we're building a pretty comprehensive solution that meets most of the agency's needs. It's hard to meet everybody's needs, but I'd say we do a good job meeting most of them. From there, they move on to stage 3, and basically we can determine if it's going to be possible for ODOT to build an inventory and inspection solution utilizing tools or technologies that we can leverage with our in-house staff personnel, or is it something that's a little bit beyond our capabilities, and do we need to seek outside assistance? And if that's the case, because they've done an awesome job collecting requirements, we basically have an RFP ready to go, and we could either move to a solution recommendation of going to RFP or just straight into a production or dev build production cycle with the GIS team. So this TAM audit group process, I lose track of how many solutions we've done at this point. We've been doing this for maybe we're approaching 3 years now. I don't quite remember. I want to say we have 7 or 8 solutions in production, and we have 2 or 3 in the works, and we have enhancements going on, and we have a lot of happy customers. So again, relating this back to data governance, part of this solution process says, hey, if we're building this data set or around this asset, we're going to implement some standard attributes. And a majority of these standard attributes are based off of our linear referencing system, which many DOTs leverage for any number of ways. And we interject these as requirements because it's an easy method for us to do data integration across. Since most of these assets are somehow related to our roadway system, which is integrated with the LRS, we can easily translate assets across and relate them to one another using this LRS method. So we get the TAM audit group enforces these standards as we build out these requirements and solutions. Another thing they do is they create standard documentation. This is just a spreadsheet that we use to enforce the standards, but then also the additional fields that they need. We figure out what other data quality items that we can improve here, like if we can create domains, a drop-down list, so we minimize the amount of free-form text fields that our field staff need to input. That provides a certain level of data quality. We also try to figure out what stuff can we automatically calculate, and again, minimize that field entry component to make things more accurate. And that all kind of goes into and supports data governance. Another deliverable from the TAM audit group is standardized inventory and inspection manuals. When you're trying to leverage data for decision making, it's critical that data collected in one area of the state is consistent with data collected in another area of the state. We distribute funding to our districts based off the quality of the systems, or the conditions of the systems, I should say. So the culvert system, the BMP system, or whatever that might be. So having consistent inventory manual and inspections, or these manuals, helps provide a certain level of consistency. Now, there still is a challenge with that subjective nature of people interpreting these manuals differently, and there's a need in a governance program to provide that higher level QA/QC, which is something that we're not quite there yet, but we're hoping to implement at some point. But it's still a great foundation. Another thing the TAM audit group delivers are these roles and responsibilities for the assets. So you can see these different swim lanes, one for operations, planning, engineering, construction, and you can see all these different people who interact with an asset and the data of that asset in some way. By clearly defining what these processes look like, we can figure out if there's an issue with the flow, if we're having a problem somewhere, or an improvement opportunity to that process and to that data associated with it. So again, it helps us maintain a certain core level of quality to the information we're collecting. So in summary, for these data governance precursors, I think it kind of looks at this data accessibility. We tried to publish information as much as we could and make it accessible and transparent, even if we had problems with the information. By publishing it, it put pressure on the different system owners to actually go back and clean it up. We linked data quality with our asset management, which is, I think, important. And because asset management is a mandate that DOTs have to do, again, it puts significance on having good quality data. We use the TAM audit group process to expand our information capacity so that we could have a better understanding of our systems and conditions. And then we implemented those standards and processes. I think the big the really big takeaway from these 4 things was we started a really good culture shift by implementing these things at ODOT. TIMS and some of these asset management tools have really changed that technical appetite of lots of the people here at ODOT. More and more people want technology-based solutions because they're becoming more comfortable with them, and they're starting to recognize the value that they can deliver. And so that's a really good culture shift that's, I think, setting us up for really implementing data governance. So after this next phase, over 2016 and 2017, was a formalized assessment. We recognized that we really needed some type of data governance program, but we weren't entirely sure of what to do or how to tackle it. So we developed a custom maturity model. We did a bunch of surveys with different stakeholders across the agency, and we came up with a series of recommendations. Before we get to the recommendations, we can see the results here of this maturity assessment. So we looked at these different data governance areas like quality, policy, service delivery, all these different things. And we gave ourselves a ranking or a score between like a 0 and 5, with 5 being very mature and 0 either like being non-existent. On the spider diagram on the right, you can see that blue line, and that represents where we rated ourselves at the survey when we were doing that study, and the outer green line represents where we would like to be in a maturity in a few years. And I think we gave ourselves like a 5-year timeline at the time. And then you can see that gap of how far you have to go. And obviously, the larger gap, that means you probably have a little bit more work you'll need to do. And then you can begin developing specific action items that you might want to do to close the gap. Here's another view of the results. And I think this is a really telling graph, because you look at those top, 5 items there. Those are, at least the top 3 are just, you're talking about policy and strategic organization and outreach. I mean, you're talking about the framework. You're talking about how you're actually going to do this. Some of those other things, we actually have some pretty good systems in place, it seems, by those scores we're getting. So that tells us we really need a framework and a program of some kind to tie data governance together at ODOT. So the recommendations from the study, here's a bunch of them, and they say we need to establish a chief data officer role of some kind, create a framework, we need to review different components. And Mario had mentioned people, process, technology, and that is something those are tenets of our asset management program, and you can see those are lining up here in those recommendations. We need the right people, we need the right processes, and then we start looking at that technology that we need to be effective. So after we did that study, the next phase was, how do we start implementing these recommendations? And so we worked on developing some executive buy-in and champion of this, which is still ongoing, I think, because again, data governance it's challenging. It's hard for people to wrap their heads around and get beyond that. It's more than just cleaning up some data and some data sets. I think the ramifications and the needs are a lot larger than that. And so we managed to achieve a certain level of buy-in. We got authorization to move forward with an RFP to help develop and implement these recommendations. We succeeded in that. We did a project kickoff in April of this year, and here are the key deliverables of that project. And you'll notice they closely align with the recommendations from the maturity assessment. So the way the project is set up is we have a vendor team, and they primarily have the project manager. They have a couple principals from different parts of their team. They have an organizational change management expert. They have various data governance experts, and we have some communication and marketing strategists as well. I want to highlight that their team is not just 5 people, but those are the main roles that they seem to have. On the ODOT project team, we have a couple project managers. We have a business analyst. We have a project sponsor that's more of a day-to-day sponsor. We have a SME expert. I think I just titled that's my role. I'm not sure if I'm really a data governance expert. I'm more of just some type of expert here, I guess. And then we have the ODOT Project Steering Committee. And this is a temporary committee who is overseeing the project team and the vendor team to make sure that we are on track with what the project scope was set to deliver. And I do serve as the chair for that. And there's various people from across the agency who we meet with, and we share the work with, and we get their input to make sure we're, again, meeting the scope of the project. We think that once one of the deliverables of the project is realized, which is the formation of a data governance committee, this steering committee will dissolve it and no longer exist. So some other deliverables that we've done to date, or we've started on, is communication. I mentioned that data governance is a challenging concept, and it represents a lot of change for people. And so we brought on those marketing and communication strategists to help us with that. And this is an example of some of the material we have. It's a one-pager that we use and we reference often and we hand out in meetings, and we help just to help people become familiar with, well, what is data governance? Why is it important? And why is it more than just cleaning up some data and some tables? Because there are like real life savings. One example, I'm not sure if it's one of these on the graphic here, but I heard the story of this bridge cleaning incident where our environmental group was doing some preparation. They were issuing a contract to go clean a bridge that needed to get done prior to some maintenance work occurring. And when you have a divided highway, you actually have 2 different structures there instead of just one. Well, because of basically a data governance issue, they pulled the wrong information, they used it wrong, and they cleaned the wrong bridge. And when the contractor showed up to do the bridge maintenance work, they couldn't do it because it was the wrong bridge and all that. So, I mean, that's expensive. That's a change order. There's all these different things. So again, it's a real life thing for data governance. It's more than just the data. So the other thing we've been working on is the data governance framework, and we think this is it. We've done a lot of research with the vendor team, best practices in both the public and private industry, and this is what we've come up with so far to try to help communicate this. And I think it starts with a definition. And I'm going to actually read this because, again, people have different understanding of this. Data governance in our world establishes the guidelines and rules of engagement for business and management activities of enterprise data. It formalizes the data lifecycle interactions between people, processes, and technology to support positive outcomes. So, on one hand, it's nothing shocking. It's how we're going to manage our information. But I think it does this in a very concise way. So when we look at the framework, we start at the top with these business drivers. These are the why do we do what we do across any number of areas, from how we govern ourselves to regulations to different things. So our framework is going to have a way of capturing those business drivers and understand those data needs and components from those drivers, and then we filter them to the governance layer. And this is where we define the program objectives for how are we going to achieve those driver data needs. What's our plan for doing that? What's our policy and standard operating procedures? How are we going to measure that? And again, that organizational change management. We're going to be changing the way people do their day-to-day jobs here. So we can't just drop it in people's laps. We need to support that somehow. But then we also need to have roles and responsibilities clearly defined so that we can be accountable. And so once we understand those drivers, we figure out how we're going to govern it. Then we push it down to the data lifecycle management layer, which is really that day-to-day. And this is where governance it becomes integrated in the daily fabric of the lives here at ODOT. And another key component of the framework is the continuous improvement opportunities up and down the entire process. Our business needs are going to change, and we need to be able to adapt with those changing needs, both across the processes and the technology that we leverage. So I like this graphic. I think it simplifies data governance, so it's not quite so ambiguous and complex, and this is how we're going to start building it out. When we look at people, that's really key for this. We're looking at 4 different levels: a strategic level, a tactical level, implementation level, and support level. And you can see we're establishing different roles across those levels so that we can start spreading out data governance throughout, again, the fabric of us across the organization. And we can see different things that they'll be responsible for. In building out that data governance framework more, we're going to start defining what all this is. So this is a case of what's our critical success factors? What's the definition for that? What's the data governance process for working with those critical success factors? And we're developing these RACIs, which are responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And it tells us of all those different roles what their level of engagement is. And so we're going to build these out for all these different parts of the framework. And this is an example of the people, executive leadership team, some of the stuff that they might be responsible for, the data business owner and subject matter expert, same type of stuff. And this is all in progress right now. Here's an example of the data lifecycle. So we know we have plan, create, maintain, assimilate, use, distribute, and remove. And we have specific things that need to occur beneath those. A lot of that stuff is already happening at ODOT, so we either need to formalize those processes or we need to maybe create some processes around those too. I mentioned the Data Governance Committee, so we're developing this charter. Similar to the asset management, we have a committee over there and a structure for how that works, and we envision a very similar thing because that's been successful at ODOT. When we look at the membership, we see different tiers that we see being involved, and we have different voting responsibilities and how that's going to play out. And this data governance committee is going to be very, very key in taking those business drivers, working with executive management, and then working down those different tiers of the organization to actually achieve, implement, and monitor this program. We're building out process diagrams. So this is a draft one for how would we go about developing policy and how do we make sure that we're getting the appropriate feedback and metrics on the policy or the standard operating procedures around data governance. And so again, we're figuring out how we're actually going to do this framework. We mentioned the Chief Data Officer. So we've been working on creating job descriptions for both that role and some data analyst positions that we see to help support that role. And so we're working on those with HR and our management team so that we can get these approved and hopefully start filling these soon. Another thing that we have been working on is a return on investment calculator. One of our processes during developing executive buy-in was, well, again, why do we need to do this? Why should we invest a few $1 million in a data governance program? And we want to be able to show both the qualitative and quantitative metrics of doing this and actually realize those hard dollars, because I think that if we can demonstrate that, that's going to help sustain the data governance program into the future. And so part of the project is utilizing this ROI calculator, applying it to some stuff that's data governance related that's already in flight during the course of our implementation project, and then measuring those return on investment benefits at the end of the project. And so I'm interested to see how that turns out. I include this process-oriented thinking slide. This is, a concept for maturity models where you have that initial, like your level 1, and you're optimized at level 5. And I include this because whenever there's a large undertaking like this, people always, or lots of times people want to jump to that optimize, and they become upset or frustrated when we're not there right now. And we've had conversations with the steering committee about this. They say, well, this is great, but it really should be this way. And I have to help remind people that that's okay if we're not there yet. We have to sometimes take steps through this maturity phase to actually get to that optimized portion or optimized step, and that's fine. So again, implementing data governance, it's a marathon. It's not something you're going to do overnight, and you have to kind of walk through these steps to get there, in our opinion. So here's a general timeline of where we are. We're in Q3 right now of 2019, so we're working on that framework. We're starting to gear up to align some strategic plans, and we're hoping to maybe get this Chief Data Officer position figured out later this year. And then in 2020, we'll focus on actually implementing these standards and policies and different things. And then we'll do an assessment towards the end of the project of what actual technology changes or upgrades or things we need to do from a real technology standpoint. And then we start doing future projects to deploy that technology. So I think that's a pretty good summary of things that we've been trying to do at ODOT around data governance. And I think I'll open it up for questions, either for myself or for Connecticut.
So if you have questions, I guess you can ask them over the phone, or you can type them into the chat window.
So everyone is actually muted, so they cannot ask them over the phone. I mean, we could unmute everybody, but that's all 33 people and it would make a lot of noise. So you can type your questions into the chat window or into the questions window, and just send them, and I'll read them aloud. And then Ian and Mario and Mark can answer them. This webinar is being recorded, so if you can't think of any questions right now, but you want to go back and look at it later and then send us an email, all the contact information is in the slides. But do we have any questions? Mark, do you have any questions for the two speakers?
Well, one thing I heard from Connecticut, when they're going through that first go around of trying to implement their guidelines, one of the challenges they had was just resources or having dedicated staff. And so it sounded like it was a challenge to, get people to keep the momentum going, especially with the guidelines and participating in the committees. In Ohio, Ian, the role, the work that the groups are doing, is that formally part of their job description, I guess? Does that make sense?
I think so. So the TAM audit group, that's part of, John Puente runs that, and that's formally, I think that's formally part of his. But the other people who are involved with that, they kind of serve as a as-needed basis depending on what the asset we're working on is. And I would say that that is not a formalized part of their job descriptions. I do know from a data governance perspective, we do want to evaluate job classifications and job descriptions and try to get certain things interjected there so that employee performance is evaluated in some cases around a few data governance related items. I don't know if we'll be successful with that, but we're going to try.
Yeah.
All right, there is a question here. Mark, did you have another question, or do we want to hear a question from the floor?
No, I was going to read off the question in the question window.
Oh, I thought that was my job, but go ahead.
Let's roll. We'll go with the flow here. There's a question about, I guess for Ohio, why'd you use a vendor to set up your data governance framework?
They are helping us do a lot of research and putting together a lot of the artifacts, and they're also helping us facilitate interaction with subject matter experts here. So we have on-site meetings with different stakeholder groups. And that's actually a lot of work to do that type of stuff. I did mention, I pointed out the ODOT project team is pretty small, and we all have, the people on that team, we all have a bunch of other stuff we're doing. So it's not something, we don't have a data governance group at ODOT yet who does this full time. Hopefully we will, and that they can take on a lot of that implementation and management of it once that exists. But until that happens, I think we needed this external vendor team to help achieve some of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then the next question, I guess it's related, the source of funds for the RFP. So I guess when you were getting a vendor, I guess, to help you with the data governance, what funds did you use?
We use SPR funds
mm-hmm.
from Federal Highway, I think. I think that's where they come from, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So any other questions from the audience? Got a couple minutes more.
Mark, just a question on the maturity model. That was a customized model that Ian, you developed. Is that available through Federal Highway resources or not?
It is available, or I can make it available. Yeah, I mean, we just developed it as part of that assessment project. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the one for Ohio DOT.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
If it's not proprietary, we'd love to see it.
Yeah, we can share that. I'll have to find a copy of it, but that's available.
Also, I mentioned in my presentation, I think it was NCHRP Report 814. There's a whole suite of tools with available also that can help you assess your agency. So that might be something worthwhile to look into too.
Question for Penelope: when will this webinar be available?
Well, we're going to hit the stop recording button when we finish, and then it'll take a little while to download, and then we'll get the presentations together, and we'll post it all on the GoTug website at gotug.transportation.org. It should be within the week, but since I'm on the road, it might be 2 weeks.
Okay, all right.
Well, I just have a couple comments, I guess, of things I heard in the presentations today, if that's okay. I think one thing I wanted to emphasize, especially in the beginning, is one thing. So Federal Highway, we sponsored a peer exchange, and we did a couple of case studies that looked at data governance at state DOTs, and there was a couple of key things that came out of those reports and activities. The first one, and each of these that I'm going to mention relate to what we talked about, what we heard today. The first thing is that it's important for state DOTs to understand and emphasize and communicate throughout their agency that data is a business asset. It's important to what the business does. And when you're talking about business, you're talking about agency. And when you're talking about agency, you're talking about an enterprise view of your data. Because in the end, the second point is that business should be driving your use of tools, the data that you collect. What does your agency do? And that it seems like that should be driving your approach when it comes to data. The other thing too is something that I saw. We heard in Connecticut they worked with their TED database and application, and in Ohio they worked with TIMS, and it seemed to me, at least, the common thing between those two was that they were bringing different data sets together and then providing it out. And I think this is one thing that the technology today is making it easier to do. So on the sort of tool side, it's much easier to share data. And I think in Ian's presentation, he was getting at, once you're able to make data available to sort of other users other than the primary users of the data, then there's other things. It becomes obviously more transparent. People can see the data that you have, but then they're also, because of how they're using it, sometimes they're they raise other issues. You know, maybe they're using data the wrong way, or they have other needs that weren't considered when you know, the data, different aspects of the data were being put together. So it seems like, you know, when you have applications, efforts where you can get people, offices focused on that, you can use that, whether it's TIMS or TED, to kind of facilitate that conversation amongst the different bureaus or offices within your DOT to get things going when it comes to data governance. And that's okay. And it seems like tools is easy. The hardest part is really that culture change, you know, dealing with people. It's always difficult to get people on board and adjusted to doing things a new way to help the agency, you know, to get that agency perspective. And one thing I heard was I think it was Ohio was getting someone on change management, and I think that's there's a lot of resources under change management that could be taken better advantage of. So that's just some of the things I heard today amongst the two presentations, and I think those are key things, is really understanding that data is a business asset and business driving your you know, your management of data. So I guess we're at 31 minutes past the hour. We'll just wrap things up now. I want to thank Mario Damiata from Connecticut and Ian Kidner from Ohio for presenting today. There's a lot of information in your presentations, and a lot of good information from your experiences to the work that you've been doing. So I really thank you guys for doing that. Like Penelope said, this webinar is being recorded, and we'll make that the recording and the presentations available to everyone in the next couple of days. They should be available on the website at, and Penelope, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's gotug.transportation.org. That's where you can find all of this information and the recording for the webinar. Any last words from anyone? No?
We're good.
You're all good? All right. Well, thank you again. Thank you for your presentations. Thank you, everyone, for calling in and logging in. Our next webinar will be December 4th, and it will be on GIS in design. So thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thanks. Take care.